Okay, hello everyone. How are you doing? Good to be in community with you all. My name is Nathan Grine. I am the graduate assistant in the Student Organization Resource Center and the individual leading tonight's workshop. And so I'm so excited to see some faces on here. Feel free to turn on your camera if you would like, or unmute yourself if you have questions throughout. I will say we are recording the workshop this evening, so if you don't wish to be in the recording, just make sure that you stay muted or you don't turn on your camera. I will also add that this is going to be an interactive workshop, and we would love for you to, submit your responses in the chat or unmute yourself and share. So I really encourage you to do that throughout the presentation. So just to kind of know that heads up, I am going to share my screen to get started. So let me do that real quick. Okay. And if at any point, like I said, you do have questions, just feel free to plop them in the chat or unmute yourself and ask away. That's what we're here for. So we are going to go ahead and get started. You are with us this evening at the fourth and final live workshop that SORC is putting on, making the most of summer, student org success strategies. And hopefully you're able to walk away with some ideas of how maybe to plan your summer months so that they lead into a productive fall semester. So in today's workshop, we're going to start with the land acknowledgement. We're going to do a who and a what is SORC for those of you who may not know. We're going to go over some workshop logistics and then maximizing your summer overview and tips and tricks. And then we will have a slide for questions at the end. So we are going to start with the land acknowledgement, and we like to do this just as a way to acknowledge the land that we are currently on. We especially like to do that currently, as not everyone is in College Park. Some folks might be spread across the country or the world, and so we think this is a great opportunity for folks to really reflect on the land that they occupy. And so I am going to read this verbatim, and then we'll have a link in the chat in just a second. But the land acknowledgement reads that every community owes its existence and strength to the generations before them around the world who contributed their hopes, dreams, and energy into making the history that led to this moment. Some were brought here against their will, and some were drawn to migrate from their homes in hope of a better life, and some have lived on this land for more generations than can be counted. Truth and acknowledgement are critical in building mutual respect and connections across all barriers of heritage and difference. At the Student Organization Resource Center, we believe it is important to create dialogue to honor those that have been historically and systematically disenfranchised. So we acknowledge a truth that is often buried, which is we are on the ancestral lands of the Piscataway people, who are among the first in the Western Hemisphere. We are on indigenous lands that were stolen from these Piscataway people by European colonists. We pay respect to Piscataway elders and ancestors, and please take a moment to consider the many legacies of violence, displacement, migration, and settlement that bring us together here today. So you should notice that I dropped a link in the chat. And so that link will take you to a page that looks like this. So there's a map. I'm not going to open it up fully, but what this map does is it's interactive in that you can look where you are geographically located, and you can see what indigenous folks occupied the land before white European colonists came to that area. And so we encourage you to do this. We like to do it before we start events. And so we also encourage folks to do it before they start student events as well. So who is SORC? So here are some of the faces of SORC. This is the professional staff. There are 3 professional staff members, and then the rest are student staff. And so we have Ashley Veneman there in the center, who is our manager for student org development. We have Foster McDaniel on the left, who is the coordinator for student org development, and then myself, Nathan Gryan, who is the graduate assistant for student org development. And I'm actually graduating in a few weeks, so there will be a new face, a new graduate assistant in the suite. So you may see a new face floating around if you're familiar with us. We do have student staff as well. They are there in the top left-hand corner. So once you come into the student involvement suite, you will see our folks sitting at the front desk. We encourage you to engage with them and ask them questions as they're a resource to you all. We are located in the Stamp Student Union there on the top right, and then our space is the student involvement suite in the bottom photo there. And so we are open. We encourage you to come in to study, to hold meetings, to ask us questions and whatnot. We are open, and we would love to see your face in person. But we recognize that not everyone is comfortable being in person. So visit us on our live chat feature. So there on our website, if you visit us, there's a live chat feature that you can ask us questions. It is monitored by our staff, and we encourage you to ask away or give us a call. That works too. So our physical office hours, if you do choose to visit us, are from 9 to 5 p.m. Monday through Friday, and then Saturday and Sunday, 12 to 5. We will be extending our hours a bit until 8 p.m. on the weekdays during finals week, so that everyone has a chance to stay maybe a bit longer. And so we look forward to hopefully seeing some of you in this. You might be wondering what SORC does now that you know who we are. So we do a few different things. Here are kind of some 3 pillars that we have. One of them is programming. And so we put on your first and second look fair, whether virtual or in person. We do developmental workshops like these. And we also do engaging programming such as Turks After Dark, helping with homecoming, and kind of some different activities that you might see from time to time. We also work on some logistics, so room reservation for your student meeting, printing access, lockers for storing all of your goodies, and then we also have our resource room that you all have access to. Then we have our finance arm, which helps with budgeting. So SORC Finance, they help with motor pool transportation requests, contracts, banking, SGA. They do a little bit more of that, and there's a whole staff designated to SORC Finance. So that's a little bit about us, who we are, and what we do. You can find us online at Maryland SORC on Instagram. We post a bunch of information, whether it's about workshops or upcoming events. We promote different student orgs, so we encourage you to follow us there. You can also find us at stamp.umd.edu, which is our website, or stamp@umd.edu is our email. And then we also have a weekly newsletter that goes out, and so we encourage you to subscribe that listserv so that you can get all of the good updates that are coming your way. About this workshop today, it is being recorded again, just to let you know. So if that's not something that you are in favor of, we encourage you to not turn on your camera or speak. But we also want you to mute yourself when you're not speaking. Ask questions via the chat feature, or hold them to the end, or unmute yourself and ask. And we also, for this workshop, encourage you to jot down notes as we go through, because we will have time for reflection, and we will also ask you to share out what you're thinking as it pertains to your student organization or yourself. And so we would love for you to do so. So please do participate, share in the chat, unmute, and also write down your own notes so that this is beneficial. This recording will be made available on YouTube afterwards. So if you want to revisit it, the slides, etc., it is there. Okay, so starting off, trying to think of a successful summer. You know, it's a time for great relaxation for a lot of people. It's a time for professional discovery as you do internships or practicums or apprenticeships. And so it's a great time to like take a break from academia. But I don't think oftentimes folks think about it as a time to be strategic and to really plan for the upcoming semester or academic year. And so we, through this workshop, really want to encourage you to think about how you're going to plan your summer. What are you going to use the time for? So this summer, what does success look like for you? What does it look like for someone who is in your role? And then what would it look like for your organization? So, you know, for you, it might look like getting X, Y, and Z done, maybe getting some reading out of the way for class, whatever. But what does it look like for you in terms of your organization, your student org? Are you trying to maybe create an event, right? Like, are you trying to put on an event in the fall? Are you trying to host a retreat at the beginning of the fall semester? Um, Someone in your role, if you're the president, how do you want to conduct and organize meetings, right, throughout the academic semesters? How do you want to build a community among your team? And then your student organization as a whole, it's a great time to think about what is the path? What is the vision? Where do we want to go with our student organization? What is the mission, the vision, the values? I think the summer is also a great time to reflect upon, what do we have in our not our contract. You all know the word that I'm trying to think of. Our constitution. What do we have in our constitution? And are we living up to that? Do we need to revise it? Do we need to maybe pivot a little bit? So we encourage you to think about, how you, someone in your role, and how your student organization might be successful. We also, at this point, would love to hear from you all. What does success look like for you this summer? If you have some ideas.
Yeah, so for me, I am in an executive position for 3 different clubs, and 2 of them are like pretty small. So my goal would just to be kind of have things ready for the start of the school year to try and like attract more people. But then for the other one, it's kind of unofficial right now. So kind of keeping that on the down low, but that's a much bigger organization. And so they typically have events during the summer. So just trying to, I guess, follow what's been done in the past and try and think about what new things we can add, especially like coming out of pandemic restrictions.
Absolutely. No, that's a fantastic answer. I love it. I think you mentioned on a few points there that I wanted to touch on too, is that I think oftentimes folks are like, you know what, I'm just going to take my summer and fully take it off. And then when the academic calendar arrives, right, when the semester calendar arrives, like I'll plan then. But at that point, it's almost too late, right? Because you want to think about how you're going to recruit new members. You want to think about what you're going to be doing in terms of events and programming, if you do programming and whatnot. And so it's almost too late at the start of the semester to think about what you're going to be doing for that semester, because all of the framework beforehand should have been laid, right? You mentioned new student orgs, or maybe a student org that is not as developed as some others or established. We do want to remind you that registration is open for new student orgs and for orgs that already exist. So you will need to re-register your student org. Make sure you do that by June 3rd. So that is when registration closes. So please keep that in mind. But yes, some good points there. I think it's great to have this kind of idea and framework already built out so that when you get to the academic semester, you can just knock it out. So, and you also mentioned reflection, and that is something that we really suggest in the summer, is to leave room for reflection. We think it's a great time to reflect. And here are some questions that we really encourage you to reflect upon. Some of these might be applicable to you and your student org, and some may not be. But oftentimes people, it's okay, we wrap up the year and then we're going to go into the next, and we're not even going to think about what we did, but we're just going to do it again because it worked. But it may not have worked well, right? It may not have served a large amount of people. It may have overlooked some communities. It may not have been effective. So we really encourage you to take some time to reflect on your experience, the experience of others, your stakeholders, perhaps. What went well? Because it's important to acknowledge, what went well this year. We had a fantastic virtual program, and we want to bring it back, right? Or maybe we want to have a hybrid model in the fall. But what didn't go so well? We had a great virtual event. We only had about 10 people show up, and we could have done better if we would have marketed it better, right? So that's how you could have potentially made it better. So it's always important to ask, maybe why something didn't go the way it was planned, but what was the reasoning behind that, right? Like maybe did we not do something adequately? What was something unexpected, both good or bad, maybe that happened, and what was the result of these happenings? Um, what do you want to do differently upcoming in the upcoming years? Or how do you want to transition or pivot some things that you've done? What do you want to change? What are your strengths and weaknesses? And then also, who might be some partners that you want to collaborate with, some stakeholders, some departments? I think that is often something that takes a lot of time, is this collaboration piece, right? Like if you want to collaborate with another student org, it might take a long time to flesh out what that looks like and to get meetings on people's calendars and to really like build it and see it to fruition from idea to execution. And so we encourage you to start early and to really plan ahead of time if you want to collaborate with folks. So I'm curious from folks who have shared already, who maybe haven't shared, you can put this in the chat or unmute, but how can you apply reflection to your student org operations, or how might you specifically apply it to your practice?
I feel like, especially like during the summer when there's so much time, so like at the beginning of every school year we like set goals. And then in the past we haven't really reviewed them. We just have been like, okay, so this goal wasn't quite met. That's fine. We'll try again. But I think like this summer, like you have like the opportunity to really like flesh out a game plan for like getting that like achieved and everything. Because a lot of like I feel like a lot of our exec members come in excited, they have big ideas, the school year hits, we all die inside, and then like things like never like actually like get like, and like not I mean obviously the main purpose of our organization is met, but like the extra things that we were hoping to do like just don't get accomplished. So I think this summer is a good time to create a like a game plan to like get those accomplished.
Absolutely. No, you're so right. People really do have all these ambitions, which are fantastic, right? It's like, yes, let's get all this done. And then you're right, the academic year does hit and you're like, oh goodness, like where did that motivation go? Because it certainly is not here any longer. So yes, we really do encourage you to plan ahead and map that out. And you'll see that a little bit later in the workshop. But you talked about goal setting. Whoops, I forgot to put that in as an animation, but we want you to be really strategic, right? Like we want you to be specific, strategic. We really want detail. And we think that detail really helps student orgs and their successes. And so we really encourage folks to strategize goals, but make them SMART goals, right? Or use tactics that really allow for the specificity to ensure that these goals are met. In previous workshops, we've talked about SMART goals and we've talked about SWOT analysis. And we just wanted to briefly revisit them so that folks, if, this is just a reminder so that folks know to use them, or so that, if you're not maybe as familiar with SMART goals or SWOT analysis, you can maybe learn a bit more and implement these practices. And so SMART goals are specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-based goals. And there's a little more detail beneath each of those letters that I didn't put on the slide. But we really encourage you to think about these types of goals when creating your goals, so that if something happens and someone's not able to be in an exec position anymore, the next person coming in can be like, I can pick up this goal and know exactly what needs to be done, right? SWOT analysis is also another great tool that kind of goes hand in hand with reflection, like we talked about a second ago. What are your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats to the organization, right? A strength might be you're really great at engagement when it looks like a normal setting, right, in person, but a weakness might be online engagement. So how can you bolster that? Opportunities might be a hybrid event in the fall, right? And then a threat could be Zoom fatigue, right? Something that you really can't control, but you can try to mitigate. So that's just like a very brief example of how to use a SWOT analysis, but two great opportunities to help you work on your goals and plan ahead of time. You don't have to have tons and tons of goals. You can just have one or two or three for your organization. But if you do have goals, it is then easier to go back and reflect. Did we meet that goal? Did we not? And so that reflection is easier to do when you have this outline and this map before you. So I'm kind of curious, again, use the chat feature or unmute. I'm just curious, I'm sure we have many different folks on the call from different organizations, and some folks even share that they are from multiple organizations. So I'm curious, what does a goal look like for your org, or what would you like a goal to be for your organization?
So my organization, we work with children from a local Title I elementary school, and we do activities with them every week. And I found that like we've gotten in the habit of partnering with the same organizations for our activities from like year to year. So I'm trying to think of how to word this in a smart way, but like
You don't have to do it in a smart way, it's okay.
yeah. Maybe like I guess I don't have to do it like in a smart way, but I'll make sure like when I write it out to them, they'll just like partner with like a more diverse collection of organizations to ensure that we're like exposing the children to like a wide variety of like different like topics. So yeah, just partnering with more diverse organizations than we have in the past.
Yes, no, I really like that. And it's okay that it's not a SMART goal right now. I know someone in the chat mentioned that their internet was unstable, and if I could repeat the question, absolutely. I was just curious, what one goal might be or objective that you and your organization hope to achieve. And again, it doesn't have to be a SMART goal. It could just be something off the top of your head that you're thinking of right now that you want to flesh out later. But we're just curious to hear from folks what maybe one of their goals may be. So someone in the chat shared that their biggest goal is to have a consistent population of people joining our meetings. And that's absolutely a fantastic goal. I think that's a very baseline, great goal to have, because of course everyone wants engagement and people to join meetings. And so I think one way to think about that is, where do we have to start to get people engaged, or how are we going to inform folks that our meetings are happening, and when they're happening, and where and how, and what we're talking about at the meetings, right? And so I think that's a great goal to have. And now I think you just have to think about how are we going to get folks to that point, right? And I think that kind of goes into our next topic of setting expectations. So it's great to have these goals, but I think you also need to set realistic expectations along with them, right? What are your expectations for the summer? And then what are your expectations for the fall semester, the spring semester? And I think it's important to set these expectations because you don't want something too outrageously high, right? Like if you're a new organization, it might be a little impractical to expect 500 students to be participating. However, maybe if you've been established for 10 years and you put on campus-wide events and you've seen from year to year a consistent growth of hundreds of students, maybe it's not so unrealistic to expect 500 students to participate, right? So what are your expectations, and are they realistic? What are your expectations for yourself, for your team and your exec board, for your advisor? And this is an important one because sometimes we do require you to have an advisor for your student org, but sometimes folks are like, yeah, they're just there. But they could really serve as a resource for you. And so we love to see a hands-on advisor, someone who knows resources, who can leverage networks, who can really advocate for their students and be beneficial and be kind of a sounding board for folks to go to, right? And so what are your expectations for them? And what are their expectations of you as well? And then what are your expectations for volunteers and stakeholders? Some student orgs really do work with alumni, they work with schools, they work with nonprofits, they work with other organizations, student orgs on campus. So what are your expectations there? And so it's important to make those clear, and we'll talk about that in just a second. But it's important to have these goals, but also the expectations, and making sure that everything is very realistic. It's okay to set the bar high, but just don't set it too high, of course. And so we would love to if anyone has any thoughts on expectations, maybe what they might be for their student org themselves, their team, we'd love to hear if folks want to share. And if not, that's okay too.
I guess I'll just comment that I like how you mentioned like having them like set expectations for yourself is also like really important. Like I'm the president of my student organization, and so like I haven't had that conversation with my exec board, and hopefully we'll have it with my staff soon about like, okay, here's what I expect of you. Like, what do you expect from me? I think that's really important. So like that you mentioned to that.
Right, mutual beneficial expectations, yes. It's good to have them go both ways, right? Because you don't want it to seem like I, as the president, have all these expectations for you and then nothing on me. So that's great to have them go both ways. I know someone in the chat said that they have an expectation to meet and connect with other exec board members. I'm curious, does this mean other exec board members in your student organization or in other organizations so that you can kind of brainstorm ideas? I'll wait for this person to respond if they're able to. But don't think you have to stay solely within your student organization. That is, pick the brains of other people, right? Like collaboration is an amazing thing, and you can learn a lot and you can grow a lot from what have you done? Like I noticed, oh, you're a dance organization as well. What have you done? How have you done this? Or how'd you do that? Like we would love to do that as well, or maybe even collaborate. So that's good. That's good. Also, love everyone that's participating. Thank you so much for sharing and putting in the chat and whatnot. I definitely appreciate that. So what I mentioned earlier with expectations, it's important to communicate them. Communication is key and is really kind of the crux of many problems, right? When things go wrong, there's this communication issue. And so we think it's great to have these goals, these expectations. It's great to reflect. It's great to have this like roadmap for success. But if you communicate none of it, it's serving nobody. And so communicate your goals, your objectives, your expectations. Who is doing what, right? Like if I say we are going to have a gala, I've communicated what we're going to do, but who's planning what? You have to really break it down into manageable bite-sized pieces. My colleague in the student involvement suite, Ashley, might be taking on the guest list, and I might be getting the venue, and Foster, another one of my colleagues, might be doing the decorations and working on the aesthetic, right? Like really break down who is doing what and what needs done. When is the deliverable due? If it's not due for months and months and months, I might not work on it right now. I might need to prioritize something else. However, it's really important to know when your due dates are, and then when you have micro due dates along the way so that you can hit those benchmarks and be successful in what you're planning. I think to stick along with this programming example, I know a lot of folks like to put on programs, right, which is fantastic. But what goes into programming, right? It's important. Okay, so if we have a program coming up on the 1st of June, we almost need to work backwards. When do we need to have the marketing out by? When do we need to have the space reserved by? When do we need to have the RSVP sent out by? So you almost need to set a date, for example, if you're gonna plan an event, and then kind of work backwards. And that's kind of our example there. But a deliverable that is could be it could be a number of things. It doesn't have to be programming. It could be simply maybe mentorship, and maybe you're mentoring children. So what is the deliverable? What does that look like? When is that due? And then also, what's the vision? That kind of goes back again to the expectation and the goals, making sure that you're sharing that widely so folks can hold you accountable. But again, communication, very key. Thorough, detailed communication. I think some of the things that we like to share, some of the resources to communicate, choose your platform, right? Are you going to text? Are you gonna have a group text for your exec board, but a group me for your general body? Are you gonna use Slack? In Slack, you can do different channels. In group me, you can have different groups. Are you going to use another form of communication, another app? Are you gonna use, I don't know, maybe Snapchat, right? Like, I don't know what you're gonna use. Are you gonna use Google Hangout? What mode or what forum are you gonna use to communicate with folks? I think that's important too. Like, you don't want to be switching back and forth constantly. Like, oh, I got a text from my president, but they didn't respond to me in the Slack channel. And also in our group me message, they said this and this. Make sure you choose something and you're consistent and you stick to it. But it's important to set up those forums so that you have that expectation of, we'll be communicating here. You can find information here, and et cetera, et cetera. When is the best time to reach folks? I think having that expectation is good and communicating. We will be having a meeting on this day, on this time. Here is the Zoom link. Here's the room number, etc. I know Doodle poll is a really good option for finding when folks are available. So is when to meet. I've used both. I prefer when to meet, and it creates a great time of like, oh, okay, like I see this person available here and that person available there. You can also check calendar availability, which is a great way if you share calendars to check when folks are free. Also, I think it's important when you're communicating with folks, how often will we be in touch? I know someone in the chat earlier mentioned that they wanted to be more intentional about meeting with their exec board members. How often are you going to do that? Is it going to be over coffee weekly? Is it going to be bi-weekly, monthly? I know when I meet with folks, sometimes I'll put in the chat, Nathan and so virtual coffee, right? Because we're not getting coffee in person right now, but absolutely bring your coffee. Let's have a virtual coffee date. And so make sure that that reoccurring touch point is established so that folks know when they're going to be communicating with you, so that they can have deliverables ready, so that they can have questions ready, etc. And then also, what platforms are you going to be meeting? Are you going to be meeting in person? Is it going to be a hybrid? FaceTime, Zoom, Skype, Google Hangout? How are you going to do it? I think what's exciting as we move forward, as people become vaccinated, as the world opens up again, we're going to have this hybrid model, right, of in person and online. Maybe this event is in person, maybe this one's online, maybe the next one is a little blended of both. And we encourage you to do that, right? It's more accessible for folks. So we really encourage you to look at all your options. Also, closed captioning, great for another communication piece, right? Accessibility, that's awesome. I'm going to pause real quick. Does anyone have any questions? I know some folks have been sharing and I've gone through a few slides. I just want to make sure that if anyone has any questions, that they're being answered. Okay. Again, feel free to unmute, put them in the chat. We love to see them, but we're going to talk about some organization. So here are a bunch of different things, a bunch of different forums, platforms you can use to organize yourself. Some people love a good, to-do list and a notebook. Jot it down, have it physically in hand. That's great. That works. Some people don't like that. They're like, oh, it's one thing to carry around. I don't need it. I'm going to lose it. So people like to really ensure that they have this virtual platform to do so. And here are some different virtual platforms that we suggest. Of course, we're going to push TerpLink as it is the platform that the Student Organization Resource Center operates through. And we all require that you all do so too, actually. If you're new, maybe, if you're creating a new org. So we will have you re-register or register your student org on TerpLink. And we also want you to house all of your documents there. We really do encourage it because I know Google is listed there. I had Google there. This Google can be a great tool. However, when I leave as president and forget to transfer access over to someone else, those documents are lost. Those rosters are lost. Those plans are gone, potentially. So what we suggest and highly recommend is that you use TerpLink as your main hub for everything. You put your documents on there, your rosters, your meeting minutes, your notes, your plans, your contacts, everything goes on TerpLink. And that way, when you transition from one exec board to another, the professional staff and SORC have access to that, and we can help you gain it if for some reason someone does not give you the appropriate access. We also think TerpLink is a great tool. There's a component of like a Google form on there, so you can use a forms version on there. You can poll people. You can do a lot on TerpLink. So we really encourage you to either connect with us professionally, the professional staff that is, and learn more about it. Come to one of our TerpLink kind of not one-on-ones, but learning opportunities. Watch our videos so that you can learn more about it. FreedCamp is also another online platform. It kind of is a task management system. It's really great. I think there might be a free component, I'm not sure, or a free version, but check that out. We use Trello in our staff, and so we really like it. It's a great place to dump a lot of good information, to plan, to make lists, to have agendas, timelines. Great tool. It's a great tool. And so we encourage you to check that out. Mayema is what we use for newsletters and SORC. And so I know MailChimp is another popular platform. And so we encourage you to use both of those if you have consistent content that you are pushing out. Also, I know folks, especially in this online platform, they've wanted to grow their social media presence, which is fantastic. And we think you should do so. And a way to do that is through content calendars, looking and planning out, how are we going to do this? What hashtags are we going to use? What kind of post? Is there going to be a poll on our Instagram story? Are we going to do a regular post? Is this going on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram? Content calendars, they're fantastic, folks. And then also for this content creation, whether it's through your newsletter, through social media, whatever it may be, we encourage you to use Canva. You can do content calendars in there. You can do content creation there. You can do presentations, business cards. My goodness, Canva is fantastic. There is a paid portion. There is also a free portion though. So these are some of the ways that we encourage you to organize yourselves and to really take advantage of all of maybe the resources. And this is just a limited amount. I mean, there are many other platforms to engage with that will really help you. Hootsuite is a good social media management platform that we use in STAMP. And so I'm just curious, use the chat feature, unmute yourself again. I'm curious, maybe what are methods you use to organize yourself that aren't on here that you would love to share for others to know?
Honestly, for me, a lot of the ones used are actually already on here. I will say, though, it's good to know that TerpLink does have a document feature because I didn't really know that. And so a lot of our documents are in our Google Drive, and we don't really have that many. That kind of leads me to a question. For the roster on TerpLink, it basically has like everyone who's ever been in the club. How would you suggest organizing that compared to our mailing list? And I feel I don't want to go off topic too much, but that was just something I was thinking about.
That's a great question. So yes, you can manage your roster, and usually it's the contact person or the person who oversees the TerpLink page for your org that has probably the most access to that roster. But you can give different people in your organization different titles. So you can give, president, treasurer, secretary, but, say you're the scuba diving club and you have level 1 certification, level 2, level 3, you can designate different people to different titles so that you can see that. You can also archive folks or remove them. You can also create a document and save it on TerpLink where, okay, here is all of the contact information for our now alumni, right? Our former members that we want to stay in touch with, but don't need access to this information, right? They don't need, they're not as involved anymore, but we still want to keep them on hand. But yes, you can go in, and this might be beneficial to meet with a professional staff member, but you can go in and change the accessibility for different members. So the president might have access to everything, whereas the committee chair for social events might only have access to event planning documents, as well as event planning forms, RSVP forms. They might not have access to some other documents. So you can go in and kind of like Google, you can set a preference for who sees what. And so you can do that through the roster as well, by setting up different kind of accessibility levels, titles, etc. Does that help to answer your question?
Yeah, that really helps a lot. I'm definitely gonna like go into TerpLink and see what I can do to like organize the members a little better, because right now we're just organized on a Google Doc, so it's not really connected to TerpLink in any way. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I mean, TerpLink, there's a lot of cool features. So we really encourage you to really check it out and kind of play around. And then, reach out to us if you have questions, because we'd love to guide you in that learning. But yeah, awesome. Well, I'm going to continue on, but if you have more questions, if anyone does, stop me, put them in the chat. We also manage your time. That's a good component to being successful over the summer, in your everyday life, academic year, whatever it may be. We think it's important to be proactive instead of reactive. So I think it's easier said than done to not procrastinate. But going back to that example that I shared earlier of, okay, if this is our timeline, let me get some things done now, because you never know what's going to come up if you're planning an event, right? Like, what's going to happen that might prevent you from getting something done. So, I have the free time now. I'm just going to get something out of the way. I'm going to do it now. What deadlines are coming up? Use a Google Calendar, use reminders on your phone. But it's important to kind of understand, what's coming down the pike. If First Look Fair is the first, second, third week of the semester, and you're waiting until the first week of the semester to plan for your semester, that might not be the wisest move, right? You probably want to be planning over the summer so that leading into the First Look Fair, the first few weeks of the semester, you have a plan for how you're going to recruit, retain, engage those different folks, right? Speaking of deadlines, student org registration, I already mentioned it, but it's due on June 3rd. So the new registration and re-registration is due then. So again, please make sure you're getting those in. When is First Look Fair registration, right? I don't believe we have a solidified date for that right now, but again, something to think about is coming up, and we always know it's going to be in the first few weeks of the semester. So just be thinking about that. How long will this project take, right? Sometimes you're like, oh, okay, like this meeting might take an hour, but if you're planning an event, that might take days, weeks, months. If you're collaborating with others, again, it might take a little longer than you anticipate. So give yourself more time, build in that flex time, because again, you might need it. It's always better to have more than less. If you need an extension for this question, do you anticipate extensions? Is this feasible? If so, how long is this extension going to be? And then what deliverables might be dependent on outside partners? So especially if you're, working with an outside partner, it's always better to be proactive, because they might have something come up on their end that you can't control. So yeah, Eisenhower's matrix is a great kind of time management tool that we like to share with our students. It's essentially just 4 quadrants. And it talks about, what do I need to get done today, right now, within the next few hours? What do I need to get done this week? We'll, push it off a few days. What maybe should I delegate to others? And then what do I need to completely take off my plate, because it's just not going to get done? And so maybe that's a way that you look at your time and how you manage that, personally or within your student group. And so I'm curious to hear from you all. How do you manage your time? Do you use any of these tools? Is there a method that you prefer to use yourself? I know if anyone's just kind of pondering, or maybe if no one shares, that's okay. But I was gonna say, I know I use Google Calendar. I live by my calendar, right? If it's not on the calendar, it doesn't happen. So, so yeah, I know that's one way I manage my time. Also, it could be good to consider having maybe a calendar for your organization, right? Like here, and color code it. Here are our events in purple. In green, we have deadlines. You know, we have X, Y, maybe we have social events and meetings in orange. I don't know, just a suggestion. In the chat, someone mentioned that they don't necessarily have a tool for time management, but they do create presentations on a certain day for organizations, which is great. So they kind of know, okay, maybe on a Tuesday I'm going to do this, and every Tuesday I do this. Whereas maybe on Wednesdays I do X, Y, and Z for the org. That's good. One of our last slides here is to be adaptable. All of these things, you know, take them with a grain of salt, because as we know, things happen. Pandemics happen, right? We did not anticipate any of this, but we all have had to learn to be adaptable, flexible, and to change and pivot to make what we could of the situation. So we have plan A, right? It's to do this, this, and this, but maybe what's plan B, right? Like what's plan C just in case? Do you have a rain plan? Do you have a poor weather plan? Do you have, you know, yeah, what are your plans just in case something goes wrong? We hope it doesn't, fingers crossed, but, you know, more often than not, things go astray, and we want you to know how you can still flawlessly execute your goals and your expectations and your plans with alternative options. I think we've talked kind of about creating these plans, these goals. Think of it as a roadmap, right? Like what is the initial route, but and where are we going? But what are the alternative routes that we can take just in case? I think it's also important to look at the 35,000 level. You know, get that big, broad picture, but also be able to see from the ground level what still needs done. Like this is coming together, but oh, I noticed like over here, we still need to send out this to our members so that it gets done in a timely manner. So yeah, an example of kind of pivoting, taking an alternative route. How flexible can we still be despite a global pandemic? For example, you know, the Student Organization Resource Center always holds the first and second look fair, which are usually in person, and I would prefer to be in person, but we couldn't do that this year for obvious reasons. And so we said, okay, well, we will transition and we'll hold them on TerpLink. And, you know, though it's not what we'd like, it still happened. It still engaged new students, prospective students, and student orgs were able to gain some new members from it. So pivot and make the best of what you can. I'd be curious to hear from you all. How have you maybe pivoted in the work that you're doing in your student orgs? And maybe how can some others take away what you've learned or done?
Working with like kids, we obviously have to like recruit little buddies to like join our program, and so we definitely had to pivot with our main recruitment strategy. We used to like go into the school during like lunches and be like, hey, like, do you want to join Colorado for Kids? And when that couldn't happen, we had to be creative instead. So then like we started attending their virtual recess that they were hosting and like leading games and stuff. We like attended their like Zoom meeting calls. So I think just like looking at it from like a new perspective, and like don't be afraid to like think outside the box or do something that you've like never done before. Because honestly, I love virtual recess, and I really hope we do it like even like after COVID.
Yeah, and that could be a good example of a hybrid maybe event or happening that you do, right? You still have the in-person component, but you also have the hybrid where you have that virtual component as well. I think when it comes to being adaptable, creating plans B and C, having backup, knowing what you're going to do in inclement weather, all these things, right? The summer is a good time to plan for that, right? It's a good time to have your initial plan and concept and framework laid out, but it's also good to be like, okay, but in case, here's this, this, and this. the summer, there's ample amount of time to really look at what you want to do. And so again, this whole workshop, we really want to encourage you to take the summer to consider all of these components and how you can utilize them as you move forward in being a successful organization. That is all that we have for you. And I'm going to stop sharing actually. And so I'm curious if y'all have any questions, if you need anything from me. That's all we have, but I'll be glad to stay on if you do have questions or want to know more specifically about something that I presented that maybe I wasn't clear on.
So regarding like SORC expectations for like student organizations, I know obviously we re-register, we submit like the advisor form, like things like that, but throughout the year, is there anything else that we need to do to remain in good standing with SORC like that we can get a head start on over the summer? Or is it just like with this annual re-registering is like the main time that we need to make sure that we're in good standing with SORC?
Yes, so that's a good question. So I would say the biggest thing is re-registration, right? Or registration, because that is an annual process that happens. It's good to just kind of have on your radar to get out of the way early, because if you are not re-registered or registered at all, you'll be frozen and you will not be able to have access to our resources, to different opportunities. It's a hassle if you're not registered. So you need to be registered. I will also say it's important. Yes, thank you for attending. It's also important to consider if you want funding. SGA has different funding deadlines. And so you can check those out by visiting their website. And so it's important to recognize when those, like that's not necessarily a SORC matter. It goes kind of with SORC finance, but it's important to really understand when the SGA recognition and finance budgeting deadlines are, so that if you need funding, you can access that funding. So that's important to know when those come up. Re-registration, like I said, lockers. If you have a locker with us, it's important to recognize when and have the deadline for locker registration on your calendar. And so, because we want to make sure that your stuff stays with us safe and sound if you need it to. And then I would say the other two things are first and second look fair, just making sure that you know when those are happening so that you are registered and so that you're able to show up and recruit students. So I would say those are some of the bigger deadlines that you need to be aware of, not necessarily to stay in good standing, but just so that you are as successful as you possibly can be. And you can always reach out to us if you have further questions about specifics or how we might be able to help you in a specific area. But we are here to help you. And so we try to make these deadlines and these events known so that folks are like, oh, you didn't tell me. So yeah, I think those are just some things to consider to stay in good standing and making sure that you're abiding by. And always, if you have questions about our processes or procedures, programming in a COVID environment, definitely reach out there too. I would say follow our guidelines because it'll just make everyone's life easier. Any other questions?
No, that was it. But thank you so much, Nathan. And also congratulations on graduating. That's exciting.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. I do. I'm very excited. But we will also, something to note, we will have more workshops starting in the fall. So keep an eye out for those if there's something that you find beneficial. And if you want to send some officers too, I won't be leading them, but the incoming folks will. And so we just appreciate you joining today. And thank you so much for your participation. You shared some great examples and insight, and hopefully this was helpful for you.
No, it definitely was. Thank you so much. Best wishes with everything. Have a nice day.
Thank you. Take care.